It could be the beginning of the end for the Republican primary. If Trump wins Indiana, and it's looking like it's going to happen, it could be a done deal. But the question is, even then, will the GOP accept it? Then highlights from the very entertaining White House Correspondents' Dinner. President Obama, he played the comedian-in-chief, but Larry Whitmore generated more controversy than laughs. We will explain. Also, 5 years ago to the day, Navy SEALs killed Osama bin Laden. We'll look back at that and look ahead at its legacy. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday night. Well, the Indiana primary, it is tomorrow, and it is starting to look like it could be a big night for one Donald Trump. Latest polling numbers show that Trump is holding a 15-point lead. That is making the Donald even more confident than usual, if that's possible. Here's what he had to say.
It's over. I think it's over now, but it's over. Cruz cannot win. He's got no highway. He's got nothing. He's way behind. I'm leading him by millions and millions of votes, and I'm leading him by 400 or 500 delegates. He can't win.
So I think he's saying it's over. All right, let's bring in our panel right now. Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College and professor of campaign management at NYU. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author. Gian-Carlo, former aide to President George H.W. Bush. Nan Hayworth, former Republican congresswoman from the great state of New York. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. All right, before we get into some of the sidebar stuff that went along with it, is there an acknowledgement that if tomorrow goes the way the numbers say they do, even after all the alliances and all the survivor plot lines, even all the, Carly Fiorina with the team and the whole bit, that this is it?
It's pretty hard to see how Donald Trump is not the presumptive nominee if he has a big night tomorrow night, Richard. Obviously, numbers will tell the tale of the tape, and 1237 is the magic number. That's not changing. He's got to hit that number. But from a perception standpoint, if Trump has a big night on Tuesday in Indiana, I think it's over.
Now, forget about the level of acceptance, and we'll get into running mates and all that in a second, Nan. But the point is, how much hunger will there be to contest for every last delegate if they see after tomorrow that the math is the math, that it's just not worth fighting all the way to Cleveland, let alone at Cleveland?
I'm calling it the Trump pivot, and I think it's a twofold pivot that Republicans need to do and that Donald Trump needs to do. Republicans need to accept that the numbers, the momentum, the passion are clearly on Donald Trump's side. You cannot deny, and Gian-Carlo knows better than I, you can't, having worked with presidents, but 30,000 people at every appearance, basically, it's over. I agree with Mr. Trump on this. And now he needs to pivot. We really desperately need him to pivot to a general election approach.
Now, whether he's capable of that, willing, and even there'll be acceptance if he even tries to do that, it's a different story. But Andrew, I go to you when it comes to delegate math first here. Is there any scenario, let's say he wins at single digits, but he wins Indiana, that whether there's clawbacks in places like Louisiana or in other places, that we could still get to Cleveland where he doesn't get the magic number?
Obviously, Indiana is going to determine a lot of this, but Trump's ahead of the pace where he needs to be for the first time in months, and Cruz is so far behind in this process that it doesn't look particularly likely. He's starting to lose some of the momentum in the clawbacks in previously voting states and how they actually allocate their delegates. And we're starting to see reports that some delegates who had committed to Cruz are now walking that back and starting to go along with the way that their district or their, whatever they represented actually voted for in the first place. But there's one other aspect to all of this too. Yes, it's the math. Yes, it's the momentum. Indiana's a state that Ted Cruz probably should win. And earlier in this cycle, if it was around the time of Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina, he probably would win Indiana. It fits better to his profile, it fits better to his policy positions. And if he can't make a stand in Indiana, he really has no argument for deserving the nomination at that point.
And to top that off, he said that Indiana was critical if he was going to win, Jeannie. So it's not like he can play the expectation game. He said it. We're also hearing reports that there's dissension within the Cruz ranks here. Forget about the checks drying up here. The people within are looking at the numbers and they don't add up. Now, I never want to pour dirt on before the actual vote here. We've seen a lot of surprises. But assuming the polls have been right, and for the most part, as you tell us, they have been right here in this process, where will Cruz turn around and say, that's where I lost this thing?
You know, I think he's got to, you know, look back to New York where he lost this thing. I mean, you come out of New York, a huge win, and then you come to the 5 states where Donald Trump wins every single county across 5 states. These are not, you know, all Rust Belt counties. These are counties that are wealthy. These are counties that are middle class. These are counties that are poor. He gets every single one. And as Andrew mentioned, the momentum is huge, and that's how this process always works, right? Once the momentum starts, it's very hard to turn that back. And then you look at, you know, Governor Pence, poor Governor Pence with that, you know, half-hearted endorsement there. I mean, if that didn't say it, I know, like you don't have to vote this way. I love Donald Trump. I'm going to vote for this guy. I mean, it was the most half-hearted endorsement you've ever heard. And now, you know, we all know that Bernie Sanders is all but over, and yet he's got more momentum behind him than Ted Cruz right now. I mean, he's within 4 points of Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, I think the nail is in the coffin for Ted Cruz. He could still fight this thing to the convention. He's got the money to do it. But are you telling me he's really going to make any headway in California? No. I don't think so.
Now, Dominic, before I get to what happens next within the party, and you know how much they're going to either hold their nose or not for this thing, you could. A lot of times I've been surprised, certainly this year with what's happened, and I haven't read the Pulse, but right away, when there seemed to be this alliance between Cruz and Kasich, it screamed, this is a mystery of what's going on in this election cycle. People hate the inside thing. People hate the idea of like party insiders working in a back room to try and rig the election and whatever else. I'm like, has anyone been paying attention? And of all people, Ted Cruz, who loves to throw the fly in the ointment, for him not to read his own base here in effect, talk about tone deaf.
Yeah. Richard, this race on the Republican side was over way before that agreement. To be honest with you, my colleagues are being nice here. This was over for Ted Cruz the night of the first debate. Ted Cruz, he did much better than expectations. He never had a shot at the nomination. No one likes him. He was just the alternative to Trump, and voters are saying now that we want Trump. The establishment must rally behind him. They have no other choice, and so they're like, bye, Ted, we didn't like you anyway.
Well, let's see if they will rally behind him. And Nan, the fascinating thing to me is when asked, okay, who'd like to be the running mate? Usually, this is a terrific honor. You'd love to, whether your political star's on the rise here, you hit yourself, and even if you lose, look at Paul Ryan. He decided to do it, even though he and Mitt Romney certainly on a policy side weren't, but albeit, he took the gig.
Yes.
If we look at some of the names that over the last weekend have not only said no, they've made sure they publicly have said no, so nobody thinks any way, chance, way, shape, or form it would be.
Yeah.
Now, Trump can laugh all he wants about this, that he didn't want them anyway, but I've never seen people so publicly saying, don't you dare attach my name to it. If asked, I won't serve. Don't even, it's not even funny as a joke. I'm not the person.
I would counsel them not to take that kind of approach. It's not necessary. If you want to have those kinds of quiet discussions behind the scenes, go right ahead. But to Dominic's point about Ted Cruz, and it's absolutely true, no one likes Ted Cruz. One reason is because he has made such extreme declarations in so many ways throughout his time in the Senate. He's done it during this presidential campaign as well, New York values. All Republicans should remember that it's far better not to make those kinds of declarations that are highly negative about a fellow Republican or about a constituency. Just don't go there. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say it. And I would hope Mr. Trump will do the same thing.
I heard Nan giving counsel to say, hey, don't go so public with this. You're very close. You're very close with the Bush family still. Jeb Bush, when somebody suggested to a close person, he said, ha, 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 and it kept going for about 5 minutes. Okay, the idea of it. Governor Martinez in New Mexico, the idea that it would be terrible politics for her to be considered for this. She's got a big Latino electorate there. I would have done what she did. I'm not interested. Please don't ask me. If asked, I will say no. Why not put it out there that you're not a Trump person?
I had a lot of money riding on the fact that no matter what happened in our primary, she was going to be the running mate that would be chosen. And the fact that she has taken herself off the table pretty much tells you everything you need to know about this election cycle.
Where's he going to go?
Well, there are a lot of places he can go. I mean, I could come up with the profile of the kind of person he should. There's one individual popped into my head. Man, you probably know her. That's Martha McSally of Arizona, a female, a veteran, sued the Defense Department for so she didn't have to wear the head garb when she was off duty in Saudi Arabia. From a border state. I mean, she fits the profile. I think a military person and a woman, and if you can combine the two of your Donald Trump, from an atmospheric standpoint, you've got the magic medicine.
The name and all
How about
those go.
Condoleezza Rice?
Right, exactly.
How about Condoleezza Rice?
Never in a million years would she take the kid.
Hey,
You know
never
that.
know.
Come on.
You never say never, and I agree. I mean, I can't imagine it's.
Screwed up with 6 people who said never.
Yeah.
But
Well,
6 people.
but
But
did
think
they-
of the gravitas. And this really comes down to it's for our country. If you really
So if he
believe,
calls you Nan, would you take the kid? Would you want to be Trump's running mate?
I don't think I'm going to be getting that call.
Okay,
Richard.
that's not an
But-
answer, by
but
the
no,
way,
No,
yeah.
you know what? If he happened to call me, which he's not going to, but I would accept it.
should.
I would accept it because it's for the country. And I would do all
Okay,
I can for
well,
this country.
This is a great point. This is a great point. And in fairness, you had Marco Rubio out on that list, and either yesterday or this morning, Rubio now has said, "I will support the Republican nominee."
Doesn't mean
if
you
he's
wanna be
supporting,
the
hold on,
running
but
mate.
if you're supporting the Republican nominee and the Republican nominee asks you to serve with him or her, you got to do it.
I don't know. I think it's
agree.
interesting. I don't remember how many people in any cycle in either party coming out so publicly. Andrew, we talked about last week. The idea that one of the Koch brothers came out publicly and certainly didn't discourage the idea that Hillary Clinton could be the candidate that he would get behind, to me says everything as to where the Republican establishment is with Trump. Put your money where your mouth is. If you had to bet, would you say they'd say, right now we trade losing the presidency, we don't care by 20 points, 49 states they'll lose, as long as we keep the Senate. Would they take that right now?
Would the Koch brothers take that deal?
No, with the Republican establishment, I'm putting that in general
Yes,
quotes.
I think the Republican establishment would take that deal, and I think that's going to be the course that we see as we advance past the convention and start shaping up for the general election. I think there will be some tepid support, some nominal support for the figurehead, for the nominee Donald Trump.
Oh, he's going to pivot.
But there's going to be a lot of distance to try to keep the Senate in check. And by the way, what the Koch brothers said, I think, is in contrast to what Gian-Carlo said. The Koch brothers are saying, to a certain point, I don't have to support the nominee just because he's the head of the party, because I don't think he's good for the country, or that's the direction that we want the country to go in.
Well, Dominic, the point is there's this belief, and certainly Manafort, the campaign manager, said it's a character. He's playing a part here. Right. I mean, think about how offensive that is. He campaigns, he gets your vote, and it was all just a charade.
They all play a character,
I
Richard,
understand,
to a degree.
but his point was he's nothing like what we've seen to this point. I don't buy that at all. I think if we've been in New York long enough, this has been his shtick since the 80s, okay? You've known him on a personal level. To my point, does he have the ability and let alone the interest in pivoting to being anything but what we've seen throughout this whole process to now? Can he be something that he's not? Because I heard everything. Remember from one night after he won the 5 states, he gave that professional address, and you're like, who's this guy? Less than 24 hours, he's going right after Cruz and everybody else like nothing ever happened.
Richard, I just think we have this wrong. The party must pivot towards him. He is the man. He is the one that delivered all of this. And I'm telling you, the first poll that comes out that shows him within striking distance of Hillary Clinton, every Republican will be in line to say, me, I'll be your running mate. Watch and see. Watch and see. This is all going to turn. It's not going to be a cakewalk. I'm telling you, this guy might be the president.
You have seen the polls, Jeannie, and you follow them closely. And anybody here, state by state, swing states in particular, he's doing terrible in those states in hypothetical head-to-heads with Hillary Clinton, to the point that if you are a Republican in New Mexico or Arizona or Colorado or states that you would think you do really well in, now all of a sudden, you got to do different calculations, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is truly going to just come down to Florida, Virginia, Ohio, Colorado, and New Mexico. Those are the 5 states. Even if he gets Florida, Ohio, and Virginia, he only gets 60 electoral college votes. He still needs 4. But to Dominic's point, what he's going to try to do is change the map. So he's betting that he can win New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. He's betting he can change it. Now, it's a bet, I guarantee. But that means this is going to become a really granular race where it's going to be fought out head-to-head in those states. And I think, you know, we have to be careful when we look at these national head-to-head polls with him and Hillary Clinton, because that's not the race. The race is the head-to-heads, as you mentioned, in those particular states. Yep. And so he does have a problem in Nevada and in Colorado and in states with heavy Latino Hispanic populations because of the hole he's gotten himself into. So he's going to have to focus on other states that he thinks he can potentially win, and that's where Paul Manafort is a master.
We shall see. All right, coming up next, though, a lot of laughs, but also a lot of controversy. That at the White House Correspondents' Dinner Saturday night. President Obama joking about, among others, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and even poking a little fun at himself. We've got the highlights.